Hi, Steve. Good morning.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Thank you so much for coming today to do this interview. I know that it may not be easy for you, but it is a very, very important thing that we will educate the future generation about what happened. So let me ask you let me start with asking you, was it your dad and your grandfather who went through the Holocaust?
Yes, so my dad and my grandfather were the two survivors from his immediate family. So my father's mother passed, and my father's younger sister passed, and my father's younger brother passed.
So they all perished in the Holocaust?
They all perished in the Holocaust, yes.
Wow. Where were they born?
So my grandfather was born in Pinkow, Poland, and my father was born in Sosnowiec, Poland.
Do you remember their stories about what type of life they had prior to Hitler's invasion?
Yeah, so my grandfather was a cattle buyer, okay? So he dealt in livestock. My understanding is he was very prominent in town, prominent businessman. My father grew up with a governess. My understanding was my grandfather was away sometimes for weeks or possibly months with cattle, through his cattle business. And never thought that there would be an issue, okay? When they started hearing whispers, okay? And some of the whispers were like extended family members had moved to Paris and sent letters. We hear it's going to be a hot summer. Why don't you come visit? Okay.
Like a hint,
A hint, yes.
because they were afraid at the time to.
Yeah, I guess,
Describe.
I would assume, right? So just like everything else, the German war machine is moving,
Right.
okay? And there's word that they may invade Poland, I'm sure, rumors go around. I wasn't there, but I could imagine. And so like I said, some of, on my father's mother's side, their family, a lot of them left, like I said. They went to Paris, then they eventually ended up, some of them in England. But they had sent letters, or a letter, saying that, that to the family in Poland, still that they hear it's going to be, like I said, a hot summer. Why don't you visit? And unfortunately, my grandfather didn't take heed, I guess.
He probably did not believe that something like that could happen.
He did.
Like many, right?
Right.
They stayed because they were hoping that this just will pass. This is temporary.
Right, and like I said, my grandfather was, he was well off, right? There was a governess, he had a big business in the town they were in, he was well known, so he never thought, he knew all the politicians, and he never thought anything would happen.
And how did things start changing for your family, for your grandfather's family?
Well, I don't know exactly. I do know that they were placed, I guess so, Germany entered Poland around the middle to the end, I think, of 1939. Okay. I know that they were placed in the Krakow ghetto. And I could only imagine what it was like. Like I said, my father didn't talk much about it, very little. My grandfather, maybe a little bit more, but also not that much. So I just know from reading, okay, and such like everybody else, what, could imagine what it was like.
So which camp were they taken after, I assume after they were in the ghetto?
Yeah,
They were
so
taken to,
I don't know the exact chronology, okay? I know that they were, at least my father was in several camps. I believe my grandfather also. I know that we have my father's incarceration card into Mauthausen, which was in Austria.
and we have it on the display, the copy of it.
It's on
So
display.
How was he able to preserve it?
Well, no, so it's not like the original card. It's a
Oh,
copy
okay.
of the card that we
I
got
see,
off
I
the
see.
shower site
Oh, I
when
see.
we were researching.
I see.
Okay, so they were initially put into, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce it correctly, a camp called KL Plaskow, okay, which was around Krakow. So they went from the Krakow ghetto, okay, and they were placed into that camp.
I assume they were together.
I believe, it's like I said, it's pretty murky, okay? I know they were together some of the time, then I believe they got separated, then they got reunited. A lot was going on. But they did go from, or at least my father did on his card. He went from that camp, and he was transferred to Mauthausen around October of 1944.
So towards the end of the war?
Towards the end, yes. So he was in that originally. I don't know if he went straight from the Krakow ghetto into KL Plaszow, or he was there. Exactly what the chronology was, but I know that his card states that he came from that camp, transferred into Mauthausen in October of '44, and then Mauthausen was liberated May of '45, I believe. So.
You said that your dad didn't like to talk about his survival experience, but any stories at all from the camp that he shared?
Well, some of the less benign stories, something that I would share, is that he had told me once that they were in a bathhouse. I don't know the circumstances surrounding it, and there was a lot of fighting and bombing, and he was able to take a cast iron tub, and he somehow was able to turn it over and like prop it up with a brick or something like that. He got under it, and he was able to get a little air, and supposedly, mostly everyone who was there perished, and he survived.
That's towards the end.
I don't know where in the chronology of what was going on. I do know that they were transporting him at some point.
Did he share any of the stories that had to do with how they were treated by the guards or collaborators?
He did not share any stories.
What about grandfather?
I knew through my grandfather some stories. I would prefer not to say them. They're very gory, not nice.
But if I may push you a little bit, because we want to hear, as painful as it is, we want to hear those stories again, so that we don't repeat this type of thing in future history.
So,
if you can.
Yeah. So one story goes that the Gestapo, my grandfather was there with a bunch of other prisoners. There was a young woman there. She had an infant. And the Gestapo asked her for the infant. And she wasn't going to give up her baby. And they asked over again. And eventually, one of the soldiers took the baby by the legs, threw the baby in the air, and had the German shepherds eat it. Okay. There were other stories that I heard from survivors that we were in contact with many years after, let's call it late 90s to early 2000s, that they would tell me, one in particular said that they shared a bunk with my father and my grandfather. Not the type of bunk that we would share now, as kids. He was referring to camp, obviously.
Right, it was very narrow.
Right?
Yes.
And there was an issue. My grandfather, supposedly, he said, was in charge of this group of prisoners, let's say. We call it in the barracks. I don't know if they call it barracks, wherever they were housed. And someone got out of line, and the Gestapos were going to kill him. And my grandfather, being in charge, they had put him in charge of this group, okay?
The barrack put him in charge, or the Germans put him in charge?
The Germans.
The Germans.
The Germans, yes. Okay. So he said that since he was in charge and everything, and since, he felt it was his responsibility, that let him handle the situation. And my understanding from this other gentleman that was telling me the story said, my grandfather really beat this other gentleman up. He gave him a big beating. He knocked out his teeth and whatever. And he said to me that my grandfather was he was that type of man that he cared about, he was able to do that. Like, some people, I don't know if I could do that, right? Just all of a sudden, just go ahead and hit somebody, and just when he's standing there, right? But my grandfather knew that was the only way that he would survive. And that after the war, that gentleman did survive, okay, and was always grateful for
So
what
the
my
fact
grandfather
that-
did, right.
the fact that he actually had to, and it
Had to
was
be.
horrible for him, I'm sure,
Yes.
to do that, but he knew that that's the only way that this person can survive.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is a true act of heroism.
Yeah, yeah,
Incredible.
yeah.
Uh, but did your grandfather and father know about the plight of the rest of their families when they were in camp?
So I'm not really sure when they found out or how they found out. I know that when they were liberated, okay, I don't know if they were together at the time or separate, but they ended up in a DP camp, displaced persons camp in Austria. And I guess, like everyone else, I would assume made inquiries, because the understanding that I have is that his mother, my father's mother, was gassed. His sister was gassed. And I do know that my father's brother was killed because they were being transported, my father and his brother, and they were going through a field. And my understanding is a woman yelled, okay, jump, Jew boys, jump. So my father and his brother jumped, and my father was able, obviously, to get away because he survived till today. But I know that his brother was shot down alongside of him as they were running. Yeah.
It's terrible. When was the first time you heard from your grandfather, your father, that they survived the Holocaust?
So, you know, I can't really tell you when the first time was. I can tell you when, I could tell you I was pretty young, okay? If I would have to take a guess, I don't know, maybe 8, 9 years old?
That's young.
Yeah, I think so, because I knew, because I remember asking my father, Dad, why do you take your teeth out at night and put them in a glass of water? Okay? He had a bridge, he lost a lot of his teeth. Or, Dad, why do you have only half of a finger? Or, Dad, what are these marks on your body? And the answers were that his teeth were knocked out by the butt of a rifle. And the finger, I'm not really sure, I don't recall. But I know the marks on his body, he says, where he was grazed by bullets and shot.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
And so he told you, at least.
He did. You know, these are the moments, I guess, that when I was younger, I think like all children, once in a while, they also like to go to work with their parents,
Yes.
right? So I remember going to work with him, and I think some of these moments occurred when it was early in the morning. We would leave for work, okay, like 4 in the morning,
Wow.
okay? And then he would take me for breakfast at Week Wake Diner in Newark as we went to work. And, you know, I think when, you know, I remember those are some of the times I would ask him some questions.
Do you think that knowing the story, knowing what your father and grandfather went through, impacted the way you looked at life then and now?
I would say, generally speaking, I have a strong just you know, family. Family is everything, right?
Yes.
And I know, you know, life is not always a bowl of oranges or whatever, okay? And I know that in many families, there are disagreements and such. And unfortunately, sometimes they can't get hammered out. I know that people have spoken to me, like, you know, in my family, things happen, right? I have 2 sisters, whatever, people disagree, or whether it's cousins or whatever it might be. I tend to overlook a lot of things, okay? Because it was instilled in me that, you know, blood, it's all about family, you know, and how my father wished that his, you know, that he had his brother and his sister and his mother. And I actually, I worked for my father and my grandfather for a while. We worked 3 generations together. And I know my father, if I made a mistake at work, okay, maybe talking to a customer, my father always defended me. And it was always about me. He wouldn't say I made a mistake and allow the customer to know, but he would always defend me. He'd protect me. It's all about, you know, and then afterwards he would say, you know, you were wrong. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, you'll bring it home.
Yeah.
And I think that knowing you, that your dad also taught you to be resilient and to be strong, because he was obviously a very, very strong person himself.
I try to be. I don't know. Sometimes when you look at strong, you know, I don't know if I could put up the good fight against my wife or my children, but maybe other people in general. But no, I try to be strong, but, you know,
For your family.
yeah, for my family.
Yeah. When did your grandfather and father came to U.S. After they were in DP camp?
Excuse me?
When did your father and grandfather came to United States?
Yeah, so they were in
When
the,
did they come to
they were in the
United
DP
States?
camp, and then they came to, so my grandfather met a woman over there in the camps, the woman that I became, became known to me as my grandmother, okay? And they all immigrated here, so all my grandfather, that woman, her name was Frida, and my father, in 1946, okay, I believe it was August, on a ship called the Marine Perch.
And do you have the documents from their immigration to the United States?
Well, I have not the actual documents when they landed, okay, but I have ship manifests and other things that you could see in the museum that
Right,
put
right.
copies into the museum.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I was leading to.
Yeah.
And did they come through Ellis Island or a different way?
You know what? I believe they came through Ellis Island. Yes.
And eventually, your dad, like you told us, and your grandfather opened their business and were able to make their life comfortable in America, which is, is absolutely incredible to me every time I hear stories like that, what people have to go through, and then nevertheless, pick up and not, well, at least some, not slip into depression, but the opposite, to continue with life, to have the desire to live and tell their stories, at least partially, for some, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I could say a little bit more about them coming here. The first thing they received, they were greeted by Hyas, and Hyas gave them $18. My understanding is with the $18, they bought a carton of cigarettes and ice cream. And then they met a rabbi who was the head Rabbi Machsha for a kosher slaughterhouse. And that rabbi spoke to my grandfather, and he was able to get him a job. So he got him a job as a cattle buyer at this kosher slaughterhouse. And my grandfather didn't really speak English. My father spoke a little English. And my father helped my grandfather for a few years. And then my father got drafted into the Korean War. And from 1950 to 52, he was in the Korean War. And when he got out, he drove my grandfather around, okay? And that's how my grandfather taught my father the trade of cattle. And eventually they were able to open up a meat packing plant and a slaughterhouse and a processing plant. And it ended up that in the 1980s, for a short period, like 5 years or so, we were all in business together, 3 generations.
Wow.
Myself, my father, and my grandfather.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
On the display, we have a picture of a yarmulke and a prayer book. Can
Yeah.
you talk about it?
Yeah, so I remember every morning, so my father passed away when he was 60, the month he turned 60. And up until that date, every morning I can remember my father going downstairs, and on a shelf in our kitchen, he had his Army-issued prayer book, and it was wrapped inside his kippah from when he got married with, the date and everything in it. And he would never miss a morning that he would open that prayer book up, put his yarmulke on, and say the morning Shema.
Wow. Do you think that faith had helped him to survive?
I'm not sure. I know that he definitely believed in God, okay? When we were younger, we belonged to an Orthodox shul. I remember always walking on the holidays, sitting separate from women and everything like that. Like a lot of families that are brought up in the United States, we kind of broke him down over time. So I don't know if he was able to give thought, right? Like if his faith helped him, that's what I'm saying, you know.
But he kept it.
He kept
Because-
his faith,
yeah,
right.
exactly, because there, I mean, I think survivors divide into the ones who became atheists and the ones who say that faith helped them to survive.
Right, and he was always thankful to God that he survived, although he had a lot of survivor's guilt.
Right.
Okay, and I know even as we got into our teens, he could not go to sleep until he knew that we were all in bed. So if it was 1 o'clock in the morning that we walked in, and maybe he had a little too much to drink or whatever, we're teenagers, he would always be doing his rounds, making sure, okay? My mother would say that unfortunately, a lot of times he would get up having nightmares and sweaty, okay? That they were gonna take us away. And, you know, like I would assume all child of survivors, a lot of that gets passed down to us, right? Even unknowingly, right? And that's what shapes, you know, you're what your parents are. They help shape your, you know, who you become.
Right.
So,
And you became a true mensch, as we say in Yiddish, a wonderful person. So I want to thank you from the temple and of course myself for your contribution to this museum, and I will see you at the opening on April 16th.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you.